Am I not audible? Okay, who's going? 1, 2, 1, 2. It keeps on going on and off, so I'm just going to keep on talking until you can get me.
Testing,
Okay.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Am I going to get a countdown as when to start, or can I just go? Can you hear us? Are we audible? All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking this opportunity to join us. If you can hear me, if you're online, please just send a like, wave, say something in the chat. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. I'm not going to say very much, but my name is Notulu Vukapi. I am your program director for the day. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every single person that has availed the time to be here. I would like to acknowledge our acting director, Sam Kekana, for UCL. I'd also like to acknowledge our speakers that will be giving us a very, very insightful what do you want to call them? Opinions and insights on corruption. I think corruption is something that we've been dealing with within this country, and it has been a very interesting one. I was actually buying something at Spar the other day, and I felt bad not giving the teller something, because it's like, it feels like every time you need to do something or get something, you always have to do something, which is just not right. But without further ado, I would like to welcome our acting director, who will welcome us, Sam Kekana, please. Thank you. Oh, please clap for him.
Program Director, Ms. Notulu Vukapi, distinguished speakers, Mr. Marakalala, Professor Benson, Dr. Machete, and our respondent, Professor Tenga, UCL staff members present here, colleagues and partners that have joined us from various social media platforms. Welcome to this webinar. Colleagues, this is one of a series of webinars that we have planned to implement as part of UCL. And what we are doing, colleagues, is to really grow our student numbers through this kind of engagements. This is one of the series that we have planned throughout the year with various colleges to ensure that we promote our existing short learning programs to make sure that we really create awareness around some of our SLPs that are existing. And colleges have really responded positively to this initiative. What we are trying to do, colleagues, is to promote the short learning programs that are existing with a view to introduce new workshops. This will be your 3-day, 4-day, 5-day kind of interventions in a form of seminars and webinars. So this is one of the series that we're implementing today to ensure that we really test the market and to introduce this subject to various academics and partners alike. The theme of our webinar, colleagues, is that is SA winning or losing a war on corruption and commercial crime? So that is a question mark. And our academics and specialists will be actually indulging more on that. According to the 2023 population review, we are high on the list of countries that are ranked as being involved in crime. Venezuela is ranked as #1 at 83.76%. Papua New Guinea is ranked as #2 at 80.79% in the world. Guess what? We are #3 in terms of rankings at 76.86% in the world, colleagues. So it means that as academics and partners, there's a lot that we need to do as a country in terms of fighting the scourge of crime, commercial crime for that matter. And we've seen in the media recently that you know, our levels of crime have gone so high we've seen commercial crimes committed by various institutions like your Steinhoff and other entities, private entities for that matter. So, colleagues, commercial crime is not only in the public sector. Private sector as well is involved in commercial crimes. But the question is, how as a country do we deal with commercial crimes? And how as a country do we make sure that law enforcement agencies are acting on these commercial crimes? So these are big questions that we need to answer as a country. And to some extent, I don't think that we're doing enough in terms of prosecuting, perpetrators of commercial crimes. And we have seen in the media, colleagues, that the legal fraternity and the law is very slow when it comes to dealing with the issues of crime. So, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to then officially open this webinar and to officially welcome you at UNISA for those that are joining us online. And I hope that we are going to have, fruitful and engaging webinar together with our academics. And I must thank the leadership of the college, Professor Kole, as the acting executive dean, together with Professor Segwadi, the coordinator for the College of Law, who have made this possible, that we have our academics and colleagues from the College of Law implementing some of the strategies that we thought we should implement, and also making sure that they're available to support the UCL in this endeavor. Lastly, I must thank the acting academic planner, Professor Mohashwa, in his absence, for supporting this initiative and making sure this event becomes a success. Ladies and gentlemen, you are officially welcome, and the webinar is officially open. Thank you very much, Madam Program Director.
Thank you so much for the welcome, Mr. Kekana. It is a pleasure indeed to be able to stand here and introduce our next speaker. But before I do that, I just realized I did not go through just the general house rules. For those who are in the venue, the bathrooms are outside to your left. And for the question and answer session, for those who are online, I would request that as the speakers deliver their speeches, if you could please put your questions, your Q&As in the chat. We'll gather them and we will definitely get to all of your questions today. I did something very interesting. I left my whole laptop. Sorry about that. Okay, it gives me the pleasure and the honor to introduce our first speaker. With youth on his side, he is very passionate about youth and his youth as well. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Mokopane Marakala, who is a PhD candidate and a senior lecturer in the School of Criminal Justice within the College of Law, with interests in the subject fields of forensic management, intelligence gathering, corruption, fraud, and commercial crimes. These are for his following qualifications. We're going to put up, if you looked at your program that we sent you, that you can click on online in the chat. He's got a BA in criminology from UNISA, a BTech in forensic investigation, an MTech in forensic investigation, a PhD candidate, Doctor of Philosophy in Criminal Justice Policy Science, Forensic Science and Technology. He's got a certificate in fraud prevention. Right now, he's currently teaching quite a number of modules, and his particular fields of academic interest are forensic investigations, oh my, intelligence gathering, corruption, fraud, and commercial crimes. It gives me that pleasure to please have you to come through. Please may we have a round of applause. Thank you. And now you're going to use the HDMI cable, which is on this side. So you can just pull off this HDMI cable. It's on this side.
very good morning to all attendants. I will start to thank Mr. Kekana, the UCL leadership of the short learning program, and the college management that give this initiative support to come and present and for marketing the short learning program in anti-corruption and commercial crime. And I would like to thank even the students that are registered for this short learning program for this year, and as well as the academics that are forming part of this short learning program from Department of Police Practice, Prof. Benedin, Prof. Tenga, Dr. Machete, and even to send our thanks for COD, Prof. Mabudusha, our line manager. On my presentation today, is only going to focus on, is South Africa winning or okay, is South Africa winning in terms of corruption or is losing in terms of corruption? Then yes. Okay. Then on my first presentation, sorry, I just want to announce that the module that I'm teaching is CCC 0201, CCC 001K. Then on my presentation, I will start with the history of perspective trend. Then the trend in commercial crime and fraud in South Africa. What do we see? What are the last statistics telling us? The form and manifestation of fraud and corruption in public and private space. Fraud is an unfair advantage and hence it is a crime. It is based on greed, selfness, and dishonesty behavior. Public sector fraud. Fraud is in the business area. It's a universal problem affecting companies of all sizes in all countries. Okay, no problem.
And then you said you don't have a charger.
Let me give you.
Yes. Okay, so presentation ikam.
Yeah.
Then you can leave it here. Okay. Yes, presentation now ikam.
So center is safe come.
Yeah, can I save it?
You forget. Okay. Yes.
This one?
Yeah.
So you just move.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I apologize for inconvenience of the technical error. So once I'm back, I was presenting the historical perspective trend in commercial crimes and corruption in South Africa. Where do we see it, or what are the latest statistics telling us? Forms and manifestation of corruption in public and private sectors. Corruption is an unfair advantage and hence it is a crime. It is based on greed, selfness, and dishonesty behavior. In private sector corruption. Corruption in business is a universal problem affecting companies of all sizes in all countries. Corruption could be both victim or perpetrators of corruption. In a business content, corruption can include false or mislead financial report, procurement fraud, embezzlement, bribery, and etc. Then I'm going to present the effects of corruption. Financial harm will arise from this. One example of this is a company reputation being destroyed, which result in a less commercial prospect. The following is financial loss. The moral harm will have an impact on the staff productivity, and a increase in productivity causes further revenue declines, which is development, institution, and society. Remember, the corruption involved the society, the corruption involved even the institution and the development of especially the economy of the country. So, in South Africa ranking and on corruption scale, while the lay of the land is in South Africa, where are we winning or losing the war on corruption? What do the numbers say? Then in previous, we have the biggest type of corruption in South Africa, as Mr. Kekana highlighted that, I alluded that South Africa is number 3 in terms of corruptions. So we have maladministration, 25, fraud, 17%, nepotism and favoritism, 13%, bribery, 11%. The reason for committing financial statement fraud. Financial statement fraud is committed for a various reasons. It is most frequently utilized to improve the company's profitability on the paper. It happens via a number of techniques, including changing the time of transactions, recording and making valuation decisions. Those more subtitle forms of deception are frequently written off as a oversight or lapses in logic and judgment. Some of the most frequent motifs for financial statement fraud include encouragement of investment through stock sales, prevent unfavorable market perceptions, to secure funding or to negotiate better conditions for already existing funds, increasing acquisition versus price, demonstrating adherence to financial covenant, achieving organizational objectives, and rewards for performance. The causes of corruption in South Africa. As you see a picture here, we have a huge number of unions, members, and leadership, which is going to the strike where they raised the board that written arrest the corrupt, which is if there's the union or maybe the political leaders, which the corruption means caused by the high profile people who are on the executive positions, especially on the government, then the community or society, they will react like the way you see the people on the pictures. Causes of corruption in South Africa include the following: greed of money, desires, higher levels of market and political monopolization, low level of democracy, weak civil participation, and low political transparency, higher level of system of government and ineffectiveness administrative structures, low press freedom, low economic freedom. Those are the cause of crime in South Africa. Corruption is one of the greatest obstacles to South Africans' growth and development. However, the impact of corruption goes beyond the institutional weaknesses and heavily joined on corrupt individuals. South Africa does not have effective system in place to deal with individuals who are corrupt, which is, for an example, let's say in the municipal, in our country, South Africa, we had and see a lot on the news talking about the corruption. We know that the mayor, sometimes they indicated the mayor are corrupted, but there is no way, we don't have the system that can deal with that individuals to detect corruption. Hence, they continue to be in position of power, are not prosecuted for their corrupt action, and it becomes difficult to track and to recover funds that have been stolen. For an example, again, let's say the tender for the tar road, then is 150 billion, and the corruption occur during the process of doing the service delivery for the communities. Then, after that budget divided by 150 billion, if it's 50 billion lost, then there is no recovery because the money is already gone. That means they will go into do a tar road that is not quality. In South Africa, politicians and leadership engage in financial crime, fraud, and corruption because of personal greed. They want more and they don't care how they get it. What leads to corruption in government? In summary, the political corruption is a result of decentralized and ineffective law enforcement, diverse, strong urban traditions of ethnic voting, and moderately corrupt police and contractors that accept bribes. Then my presentation will end there. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, and I think you are aware that the technical errors that makes me to be nervous, but thanks for completing my presentation.
Thank you so much. As we know, we do get technical errors and people who tend to forget things when they come up. My apologies once again. Thank you so much for those insights on your topic. I think the things that stuck out for me is how you spoke about how 11%, where bribery accounts for 11% of corruption. And I'm thinking, but then I think people pay a lot of cold drink money there when you get stopped. So I feel like the 11% feels like it's just a little bit too small, but nonetheless, that really stood out for me. And the fact that we do not have proper systems to govern how to deal with corruption. That for me is actually quite an eye-opener, because we know that it exists, we know it is there, but how do we deal with it? But nonetheless, I would like to thank you so much for that. It's really been giving us some food for thought. While I introduce the next presenter, I would like to just remind you, especially those of you online, just to jot your comments in the look at me pointing there in the chat on your right hand side. You can just post your comment or questions, anything, and we'll definitely come back to you with the Q&A session. As we move on, I also have the privilege to introduce the next speaker. Now, the one thing that I appreciate is that we have a lot within UNISA. We've got so much talent and so much knowledge. And when I was speaking to Prof earlier, she said to me, I'm not an expert, because an expert knows everything. So I am learning, I'm going, and I'm learning, and I'm learning, and I'm learning, which is such an amazing thing, because we always say they're experts. If you've got all these degrees, you've got a degree in something, as Miles Monroe would say, got a degree in something, but you don't have just a degree, not a lot. But without further ado, as I introduce our next speaker, I would like to introduce Prof. Benson. She is, if you just give me a second, technology is fighting with me right now. As I try and deal with technology, there we go. She's a senior lecturer in the School of Criminal Justice Science within the College of Law, specializing in cultural heritage crimes, crime investigations, 4IR in policing and higher education. Professor Benson's qualifications are as follows. She has, wow, there we go, again. DLIT in film police science, an MTech in policing, cum laude at TUT, a BTech in policing, cum laude. I love it, I've always wanted to say that. But so many cum laudes here. And as I said, again, technology. Just give me a second. Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. This is why I prefer pen and paper, because this just does not work for me very well. Okay, and a BTech, obviously, policing, cum laude at Pretoria Tech. She's currently teaching the following: FOR 1502, which is selected crimes and transgressions, FOR 3701, forensic methods and techniques, FOR 5907, which is forensic methods and technology, and supervision of masters and doctoral students. Her fields of academic interest are cultural heritage, heritage crime, crime investigation, pedagogies and strategies in ODL and ODEL, 4IR in policing and higher education. Her fields of specialization will be cultural heritage, heritage crime, crime investigation, and she has written a number of books as well that are a South African study on the interface between the legal and illegal trade in heritage items. Also, the forensic investigation of crime, irregularities and transgressions in forensic investigation, legislative principles and scientific practice. She's also written over 14 journal articles, which I must say is quite impressive. And I would like to, I think the one that stood out for me is the Second-Hand Goods Act. An incapable guardian of cultural heritage objects, South African Museums Association Bulletin 38. She's got professional positions, fellowships, and awards. Her professional positions are Editor-in-Chief at SAMAP, Council Member, South African Museums Association, Member of the Policing Association of South Africa, Member of the International Police Association, IPA. She's won a lot of awards. The winner of the Women in Research Developing Research Award in 2012, recipient of Excellence in Tuition Teaching Student Support Awards. There's a grant holder for the ODL RSP grant for 2022 to 2024, and she's embarked on a number of projects, such as a member of the think tank, Evidence-Based Policing Initiative, project member of the following community engagement projects: road safety and writing retreat for undergraduate students. Without further ado, I'd like to call on Professor Benson. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hardly recognize the person that you were speaking about there. Okay, let's just get this going and get my presentation up. There we go. And that should be mine. Sorry, I'm at that age where I need two pairs of spectacles. Petrus, can I just ask you to bring my other specs, please? Okay. Let's go right to the front. Thank you so much. All right. And if we can just start at the first slide. I don't know why it's done that. Technology is not with us this morning and not on our side, but we shall persevere and manage. Are you seeing the presentation? Okay, awesome. So my colleague and long-standing mentee from many years ago, Mr. Marakalala, thank you so much for setting the scene. Thank you so much for preparing our listeners and for providing them with some very insightful things and thoughtful things to think about. But let me pause and thank the Center for Lifelong Learning for this platform and for this initiative. I think it's vital that we harness the idea of lifelong learning because nobody ever knows everything. And as society progresses, so the need for new initiatives and new approaches is very, very relevant and very pertinent. So, and that is why we have the center which have these opportunities. But let me proceed with our talk today. And we were wondering when we were talking about the theme, corruption, are we winning or losing? And why does it matter? So I will be presenting the majority of the points, and then my colleague, Dr. Machete, will come and he will cause you further consternation by asking more questions. And we are not here to give answers today, but we are here, I think, to ask some difficult questions. I have a friend who many years ago told my husband and I that when you raise children, you don't make rules that you don't intend to enforce. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And I want you to think about that in terms of legislation that we're going to chat a bit about tomorrow, later just now. So the aspects we will be talking about: addressing corruption, does it matter? Looking back, looking forward, the legislative framework and the anti-corruption agencies, state capture and the Zondo Commission, consequence management, some successes and some thoughts. So I'm going to ask my colleagues at the back there to quickly play this video clip for us. I'm not advertising coffee.
You already know your way around the pinch. Let's go.
Baby? Babe, I need the batteries. Got a meeting now.
Absolutely no way around this defense, Martin.
Here's another way to swerve the randemic. Get any Nando's hot pot for just 39 Rand. Just to check.
Sorry, that was the wrong clip. Not a problem, not a problem.
Do you want to come up for some coffee?
What coffee is it?
Does it matter?
Okay, there we go. I can hear it, but we just need to see it. Okay.
Do you want to come up for some coffee?
What coffee is it?
Does it matter?
Does it matter?
Once you've tasted Dow Egberts, you won't drink anything else.
Yes. It matters.
Oh, do you want to come up for some coffee?
What coffee is it?
Does it matter?
Does it matter?
Once you've tasted Dow Egberts.
Okay, thank you. So the question he asks is, does it matter? And that's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Are we winning or losing the war against corruption? And does it matter? So, is corruption in South Africa a new phenomenon? Certainly not. There's much evidence in literature and court proceedings that illustrate the existence of corruption in the South African landscape. The final decade of the apartheid administration in South Africa was marked by various commissions of inquiry. What is perhaps not so clear is the level or the extent of this corruption. Be that as it may, the pre-94 situation in South Africa was certainly not one that excluded corruption. In two very recent PhD studies at UNISA, at the Department of Police Practice, the students highlighted the anti-corruption legislative framework that South Africa has. These studies were undertaken by Drs. Smith and Pillay, 2019 and 2021 respectively, and they touch on several important issues. Today I will mention two. Firstly, the legislative instruments with which to address corruption is there. In addition to this, South Africa, unlike other countries, has a multi-agency approach to fight corruption. This means that agencies share partial responsibility for the investigation and prosecution of corruption. But I've been wondering, isn't it an issue or a question of too many cooks spoiling the broth? You cannot have mother and mother-in-law in the kitchen at the same time. It just won't work. So, viewing the Corruption Perception Index for South Africa since 2019, before COVID, our figures are not comforting. South Africa had a rating of 44 out of a potential 100. Okay, I suppose if you compare it to the matric pass rate, it's above 35, so we pass, but hey, who's looking at figures? This figure went down by 1 point in 2022. We are now at 43. Look at the figures for the rest of the African continent, and it's similarly worrisome. Transparency International 2022 reports that the existence of, listen to this, unabated corruption in several sub-Saharan countries remains a regional challenge. The 2022 CPI showed that 32 out of the potential 100 is the average score for sub-Saharan Africa. It's a regional problem. It's not just a South African problem. What affects the region affects us, affects you and I. Does it matter? Using the Jacobs Coffee advert as a metaphor, the question we could be asking ourselves is this. What does it matter how much corruption there is in the country, or the region for that matter? Let's consider a moment the impact of corruption on some of our neighbors in Africa. Countries that are performing well are Botswana and Cabo Verde. I didn't know we had a country like Cabo Verde, but apparently it's off the coast of Africa, there in the north. And Equatorial Guinea and South Sudan, not doing very well. Transparency International further reports that in January 2023, the son of the president of Equatorial Guinea was arrested for allegedly selling an aeroplane that belonged to the national carrier. Can you imagine selling one of SAA's Boeings? And South Sudan, the situation is so dire that more than half of the population are facing acute food insecurity. Somalia, for 3 decades, that country has been unable to address rampant corruption, resulting in violence and instability. Similarly, our next door neighbor, Lesotho, has also seen a decline, going down from 49 to 37 since 2014. All of these countries have one thing in common: corruption, or failure by the government to effectively address corruption. So let's ask ourselves again, does it matter? The executive summary for the 2020 Transparency International report on the implementation and enforcing the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, a comparative review, reads as follows, open quote: corruption in African countries is hindering economic, political, and social development. It's a major barrier to economic growth, good governance, and basic freedoms, such as the freedom of speech and the right of citizens to hold their governments to account. Along similar lines, in the 2022 report, Delia Rubio is cited as saying, corruption has made our world a more dangerous place. Our world. Look what is going on in Russia. Go and read the history of what happened to get the president of that country there. What he had to do to get to be untouchable, in inverted commas. It is scary. Governments have collectively failed to make progress against it. They fuel the current rise in violence and conflicts and endanger people everywhere. Now, this might sound very familiar. The only way out is for the state to do the hard work, rooting out corruption at all levels to ensure governments work for all people and not just the elite few. Does that sound familiar? Now, we all are familiar with the Zondo Commission. I think we sat transfixed for 4 years watching live what was going on. And I mean, I saw some amazing legal minds at work, and we heard some horrific testimonies. The State Capture Commission made 202 recommendations with respect to criminal investigations and possible prosecution of individuals, persons, they named and shamed, entities, and they named groups of people as well, collectives. The recommendations are being addressed through a joint law enforcement task force working in collaboration with other agencies, such as SARS, our friendly tax collecting friends, and the FIC. Look, if there's one thing you learn in your life, you can lie to lots of people, but you don't lie to the tax man. They know everything. Charles touched on this, procurement fraud. Is this our ground zero? Is this where we are losing, where there's a hole in the bucket, literally? So the Commission identified that the public procurement system as the primary site for redirecting state resources. And if you look at the public procurement legislation, the way it is crafted was so that public procurement tenders would benefit normal South Africans, that everybody would have an equal opportunity to get a slice of the proverbial pie. And I think we can all agree that that has not happened. We haven't even had the opportunity to have a few crumbs. A central component of the state's response in this report should be to enhance the integrity of the public procurement system, specifically our state-owned enterprises, because they have the bulk of the budget. The bulk of our money, your and my taxpayers' money, is there for infrastructure, for services. The Commission also noted that state capture was facilitated by a deliberate effort It wasn't accidental. Somebody didn't just wake up one morning and, oh my head, something has happened. It was deliberate, it was evil, and it came with plans for self-enrichment. A deliberate effort to subvert and weaken, first of all, law enforcement, the people who are supposed to be prosecuting, our intelligence community, and revenue collection, our friendly friends from the SARS, at the commanding level. So there at the top where the guy signs, the buck stops here, there, to subvert and weaken by placing people in power there, so as to shield and sustain illicit activities and avoid accountability and disempower opponents. So in other words, they are supposed to be held accountable, but something is not happening. And this has impacted also outside South Africa, because these guys that are getting the billions, I mean, I haven't even seen $1 million in cash. And then I hear some of these people had $1 million in a rucksack. How big must that bag be? Now you have to get rid of that. You have to somehow launder that. How do you do that? Money laundering. Money laundering. We have the Poker Act. We have assets forfeiture. And this is where the Financial Action Task Force focused on South Africa. In 2019, they made recommendations that said, guys, here's some red flags here. Money laundering, financing of terrorism. We've identified a couple of things that you must take care of, and we didn't. And what happened? We've been grey listed. Does it matter? Guys, the impact of grey listing. It deters foreign investment. What happens to our economy? It shrinks. What happens to unemployment? It rises. Companies close. People lose jobs. Students study, get degrees. No job opportunities. Higher interest rates. And a pressure on the cost of living. I went to buy Weet-Bix last weekend. Sissy, a box that I used to pay 64 Rand for is now 94 Rand. How are the pensioners living? How is it possible? And we ask ourselves, does it matter? Further impact, whistleblowers. Babita Diukaran, she paid the highest price. The highest price. Klute Murray, he and his son, they paid the highest price. Ethel Williams, he fled the country. Musilo Mutepu. Tabisu Zulu. And these are just some of the whistleblowers, some of the heroes who are speaking truth to power, and some of them paid with their lives. Does it matter? Who is winning? So, in spite of all these horrors, I was telling a colleague of mine, I've been reading for a couple of weeks now, and it is, it's depressing, the extent of the rot. Is it possible to address the issue of whether we are winning the war on corruption or not, just by looking at the literature? Can we make a determination? There's been not an opportunity to speak to those who are doing the work, who are pulling together the dockets, who are pulling together the evidence, who are presenting evidence. So we have to rely on media reports. And there are a couple of things to celebrate. So to date, the Investigative Directorate of the NPA have enrolled 26 cases. It's more now. These figures is more now. Declared 89 investigations, and 165 accused persons have appeared in court for alleged state capture-related offences. As of 30 September, the freezing or preservation orders to the value of 12.9 million have been granted. How do you hurt a criminal? You take his money. You freeze his money. A total of 2.9 billion has been recovered by the Assets Forfeiture Unit and returned to the affected entities. The SIU has instituted 4 High Court cases in relation to contracts worth 62.1 billion. I didn't even know these figures existed. SARS investigations arising from the Commission's findings and evidence have resulted in the collection of 4.8 billion rand in unpaid taxes. Now look, if you and I owe SARS 50 rand, they nail you. Evidence was produced. If you have this cost of living, where's your income coming from? Why are you not declaring it? And that's at the heart. What does it matter? Now my mouse is gone. Okay, let me try that. Okay. The recurring themes that I've been seeing: poverty, instability, inequality, unemployment, economic downturn, nepotism, cadre deployment, declared unconstitutional, so by the way, and an increase in the cost of living. Having read all these articles and research, the picture is dire, and it can be very depressing. I'm sure that there are other themes that one can identify, but one thing I didn't find was this: consequence management. And I think Charles also referred to this. Various postgraduate studies have highlighted the lack of consequence management for non-compliance with auditing regulations and laws in the South African procurement process. Don't make a law unless you intend to enforce it. Otherwise, it's useless. In Dlomo 2016, the root cause of irregular expenditure in the department he studied was mainly non-compliance with prescribed financial management prescriptions, which included, among other things, the lack of consequence management by delinquent staff members or officials. Can somebody just help me find the mouse here? The mouse seems to have disappeared. I need to scroll down. The mouse has run away, seriously. Can you see? It's gone. It's been, there it is, thank you. Okay, because I need my notes this side. Manaka, similarly, 2021 study revealed that causes of fraudulent activities in public entities are due to greed, Charles touched on that, self-enrichment, he touched on that, lack of consequence management, I can mess up and sometimes I get a golden handshake to go away. Lack of oversight of what the employees are supposed to be doing, and a high prevalence of corruption in government institutions. Because, hey, this is the way we roll here. Fourie and Milan, 2022. South Africa is also known for high levels of fraud, corruption, and collusion among public officials with apparently very little consequence management. Part of the problem is it seems that people are getting away and that crime pays. I was speaking to my housekeeper the other day, and they had a community forum, and the police were there, and they asked some of the youth in the area why, because they were targeting the ladies coming from the shop, stealing their handbags. But why are you guys doing this? Why aren't you working? There are some jobs. No, it takes too long. This is quick money. So what is the message in some of our youth that they are getting? Crime pays. Because what are we seeing from the top down? Crime pays. It is now indeed my incredible honor to call to the chair my colleague, Dr. Machete to come and present a few further talking points. As he comes up, I just want to show you that we do our research ethically and honestly at UNISA, and these are all the sources we used to put together this presentation, and I give due regard for them. Dr. Machete, thank you.
Thank you so much. Before Dr. Machete comes up, I would just like to introduce him to you. Technology is also not my friend. I am trying. I'm here, but I'm here. Okay. Dr. Petrus Machete holds a Doctor of Technology in Policing. He was a member of the South African Police Service under Research and Curriculum Development, where he received an award for Best Intern Employee at SAPS Human Resource Development in 2015. After the end of the internship program, there we go, mouse gone as well, worked on contract as a forensic investigator at Sizwe Ntsaluba Gobodo under Forensic Department from 2016 to 2017. In 2018, he was appointed as a lecturer at Tshwane University of Technology under the New Generation of Academics programs. Then in 2019, he joined UNISA as a senior lecturer in the College of Law under the Department of Police Practice. I will hand over to you right now, sir.
Good morning. Thank you, Program Director and organizers for this webinar. Just for point of correction, I'm not a senior lecturer, I'm a lecturer. Thank you. I'm not going to project anything. I am just going to speak on some of the points that Prof. Benson, my mentor, has already mentioned. She took us through the history of corruption before 1994 and up to date. And she raised the question, are we winning? Does it matter? I would like to quote from one of the activists, a high public figure in our governance in South Africa. She was addressing the media in 2016. These are her direct words. She said, addressing the media, a public figure in governance. She said, all of us in the National Executive Committee have our smallanyana skeletons, and we don't want to take all the skeletons out because hell will break loose. This is a member of parliament. So are we winning? How did we get here? Before 1994 and to date. And we still gathering here, projecting statistics that are horrible. The Zondo Commission report, most whistleblowers, already Prof. Benson mentioned some, those who blew the whistle against companies which were involved in the companies and individuals which were involved in the state capture. Some had to leave the country in fearing of their lives. So now today, people are afraid to even report corruption. They can witness it. They lost trust in our structures in governance, our public sector and private sector both. Do we have ethical leadership? Is our private sector and public sector transparent? Do we use the tools such as vetting and lifestyle audit? To gain public trust, we need to do something. We need to have more sessions like this, short learning programs to equip our investigating officers and to install ethics in our representatives. Yes, it is possible, Prof. Does it matter? Is it possible to fight corruption? Yes, it is possible. We need to use these seminars, colloquiums, and have more programs that will educate people or equip people with skills to fight corruption. I don't have much to say. This is all that I wanted to say. Thank you for organizing this program, and we wish that we can have more of this. But hopefully, we will get there. We will win. Because if we lose hope, we are the last hope. If we lose hope, nothing will come out. I thank you.
Thank you so much for that. There are a few things that stick, that have stuck in my mind listening to those presentations. Thank you so much, Prof. Benson, Prof. Machete. 29 years into a democracy, and we're talking about this. 29 years into democracy, and we have people that literally have no normal flushing toilets. The money is there for the infrastructure, but the infrastructure isn't there because it's being misused. You look at just a simple example with Sandton and Alexandra, just separated by one highway. And that's because the money that is supposed to be used is not being used the way it's supposed to be used. Another example we could use, I'll just think about the COVID PPE situation. Certain people got very rich. A mask was like 300 rand per unit. That's how bad it was. So when you look at all of this, and we've got such a beautiful country, and there's so much investment. And when you were speaking, Prof. Benson, I'm thinking there's so much we could do with infrastructure, especially in the Eastern Cape, in KZN where it's really bad. Queenstown, for instance, we can use an example. The infrastructure is there. They've been building a road for over 10 years, one road. The pipes are there for sewage. Still, we saw it in the news. They were striking. They literally closed down the N6 because of that. Does it matter? Food for thought. It does matter. And as Dr. Machete just said now, it starts with the little things. Equipping people, equipping ourselves, ensuring that we ourselves hold ourselves accountable for what we do. So that cool drink money, let's not do that. The simple thing to skip the queue at Home Affairs. Those are the small things that lead to the big things. But anyway, I am not here to give a talk. I would just like to welcome Prof. Tenga, senior lecturer at the Department of Police. If you could please, I did not get your bio, unfortunately. I apologize profusely for that. But may you please come? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. My name is Godfrey Tenga, as been introduced. Those online and our audience here, so I'm just going to be a respondent, do an assessment of what has been presented by our keynote speakers. They've indeed provided us an overview of what the problems are in the country. So there will be questions after I've left the stage for our keynote presenters so that the matters can be cleared once and for all. We'll be enriched than we had come here first. So I want to say to you that indeed is truth. What they've presented is what is the actual problem that exists in the country. Nationally, internationally, we do have policies, internationally meaning at United Nations level, the whole world. We do have policies such as the United Nations Convention on Corruption. It's operating internationally. South Africa is a signatory to that convention. We do have OECD, bribery convention, covenant. South Africa has adopted that as well. Though it's a non-member, but it has adopted that. In principle, it says, I buy into all these articles, all these laws that are contained in the OECD bribery, anti-bribery. So we come to the continental level. The continents, Africa, you have USA, you have the Asia, you have all those continents do have their own bodies. I'll limit myself to the African continent. We do have African Union. The African Union, we do have a charter. Okay, so the African Convention on Prevention and Combating of Corruption is there. South Africa is a signatory to that. We do have also the protocols related to the convention is there. We do have an African court, court on human rights and cultural rights that is based in Arusha. When you have exhausted all your internal remedies in specific countries in Africa, and you want to take the matter to the highest levels, when you notice that the government is not doing enough, you can approach that court and exhaust all your legal issues there. Then I come to the regions, SADC. SADC is one of the 8 regions that we have in Africa. Amongst those 8 regions, we do have 5 courts that are responsible for those regions. Once you have exhausted your internal remedies in those specific, in your jurisdiction where you live, your country, you can then approach those regional courts to exhaust whatever that you want to put there, to adjudicate your matters. But unfortunately, we know that in the SADC region, the heads of states came together and said, we discontinue, we suspend the SADC tribunal because we did not like the decision that was granted against the farmers against the government of Zimbabwe. And that is what happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, indeed, in South Africa, I come back to South Africa, a national country. We do have several legislations that fight corruption. The speakers have touched on some of them. The PRECA, we hear that. The POCA is there, that is responsible. We use that legislation to fight money laundering, organized crime, and racketeering activities. FIC, Financial Intelligence Center Act, is there. We use that to fight against suspicious transactions. When you see so many of the despots and fugitives that are roving around South Africa, you see they are purchasing mansions, exotic cars, Cape Town and all over leafy suburbs to clean their monies. All of a recent, we've seen a Bulgarian national in Cape Town was traced and was found to be involved in all these money laundering activities. We do have the Competition Act, the Protected Disclosure Act. In government, we do have PFMA Act. Municipalities, we do have the MFA Act. We do have the Witness Protection Act. We have the Executive Members Ethics Act. I mean, we have the National Development Plan 2030. We have the National Corruption Strategy. I'm one of the advisors of the NEC. We have all this in place. So back to the question, is South Africa winning or losing war on corruption and commercial crime? So I've got questions, and I hope that you are going to add on what I have so that the presenters will be able to illuminate us on these questions and those that will come from you. How to eradicate or lessen corruption in South Africa? What needs to be done to eradicate or lessen corruption in South Africa? Our law enforcement agencies, are they fully capacitated to investigate corruption? What about the National Prosecuting Authority? Are the prosecutors fully trained to adjudicate on these matters of corruption and commercial crime? The presiding officers, magistrates and judges, what are we saying about that? So these are some of the questions that we have. The politicians, I heard one of our speakers, Mr. Marakalala, mentioning the politicians. Those are politically exposed people, including their families and all that. Are they involved in corruption commission? Are they committing corruption? Are the police corrupt? Do commissions, state commissions of inquiry, do they assist in fighting corruption? What do you say about that? Do you support what is happening where there is some suspicion of corruption and all that? Then state commissions are then instituted and are then tasked to investigate to determine whether there is corruption or not. Do you support that? Those are some of the questions that I'll expect the floor to ask our keynote speakers. What should be done to protect whistleblowers is quite painful. It's heartening, to be honest. We see, indeed, many of them are being killed. Professor Benson and Dr. Machete have given some clues on us to say, we remember Ms. Babita Joram, she was killed just like that, no consequences. Is cater deployment a bad thing to have in a country? So we'll ask our keynote speakers to explain. I hear they mentioned that it's against the laws of the country. What are we saying? Single law enforcement agencies, will that work for South Africa or not? The Zondo Commission, State Commission of Inquiry, made some recommendations. Two of the recommendations are the establishment of an independent corruption agency. And again, an independent procurement corruption agency. What do you say? 2 agencies be established to fight corruption in South Africa? You need to keep on bringing those questions. It's food for thought for you. Indeed, the Professor Benson and Dr. Machete mentioned the multi-agency approach in fighting corruption. We need to find out, maybe they expand more on this to say how should this be done. They mentioned the countries that are doing well in terms of fighting corruption in the SADC region. Botswana is one of them. Cape Verde, she mentioned that is one of them. So what can we learn from those countries? what are they doing good? She also mentioned Lesotho, that is reducing the corruption levels. What is Lesotho doing good that South Africa can emulate from? So those are some of the issues that should come from the floor so that the keynote speakers can address us and expand on that. The FATF, that's painful. We hear that FATF has grey-listed South Africa, and the consequences mentioned there are very dire. Job losses, high interest rates that you have to pay on loans, that you take loans, you have to pay high interest rates, cost of living, and so many other issues that are very bad for the ordinary South African. Indeed, corruption is cancerous. It steals from the poor of the poorest. So how can we come out of this? Anathema. I call it anathema because it's happening in all sectors, public and private sectors. Dr. Marakalala also mentioned that maladministration in government, 25%, he said 25% is too high. The public officials who are servicing the ordinary people seem to be raking in millions and millions of rands, divesting resources. I mean, have we touched about issues of safe havens? South Africa is one of the safe havens, likened to countries such as Equatorial Guinea that Professor Benson and Dr. Machete mentioned. I mean, it's very attractive to these criminals. Despots are roaming around the country. Wanted criminals, very dangerous criminals all over the world are coming to South Africa. And they are washing their money just like that. What is the Financial Intelligence Center doing? Are they not able to trace these suspicious transactions that are going in and out of our banking systems? These are the questions that we should be asking so that we are better equipped when we live here. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to say more on this, but because of time constraints, I think I should hand over right now to the program director so that you have enough time to probe and ask more questions to our keynote speakers for the benefit of all those online and our audience present with us here. So I think I should do that. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really cherish it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Prof. Tenga. My apologies for addressing you wrong earlier. Thank you so much for those questions. And I'd also like to thank all of the attendees online. We have noted all your comments and all the questions. I'm telling you, it's quite a robust conversation happening there in the chat. I'm going to start off by opening up the floor to all the attendees within here. So the questions, we've got a roving mic that's going to go around. And please feel free to ask any of our presenters a question. And yes, let's go from there.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm not sure if my mic is on. Okay, yeah, it's on. My name is Edwin Marco from UCL Finance. I just have a couple of questions concerning the presentation that we just heard. The first question, some of the questions they have actually touched on them, but the first question that I have is that to our presenters is, does the NPA have the capacity to deal with fraud, cybercrime, particularly if we can check the case of Steinhoff? Marcus Jooste has been attending the court, but he has never been charged here in South Africa. It's only the German government that want to charge him. And I'm not sure if we do have enough capacity on our side to charge Marcus Jooste. And the other thing is the government doing enough also to move us away from the grey listing. The other one, yes, the consequence management, they have touched on that one. The other one is also with concerning to the cybercrime that we have experienced on our governmental department, where they would hack into the government system. I think the recent one was with Home Affairs, I'm not too sure. Can you imagine the impact if they can hack into our government system? What could happen to all of us? And this one will be a bit controversial that I have. This is concerning our constitution, our democracy. I don't think the so-called constitution that is being praised around the world, that we've got the best constitution. I don't think the constitution is doing favors to us. I mean, this is at some point there was a comment, they said South Africa is a sort of like a World Cup of all the crimes that you could think of. And this is true, because it seems like each and every criminal runs to South Africa and come and do as they please. And also with the gold mafia, I'm not sure if you have seen the documentary of the gold mafia. And this has to do as well with occupational fraud, where they collude. Just recently, in relation to the gold mafia, there was a bank official that were colluding with criminals in order to wash the money. And it seems so easy. So I'm not sure if we have the capacity as the government to fight this corruption. Thank you. I'll end there.
Thank you, Mr. Makwe. I'm not sure who would like to respond to that from any of our presenters. Okay. Would you like me to?
Just to add the last one. The KZN flood victims. Till today, there are about 400 and something for families that has not been assisted, but the funding was out. So another thing, is the AG also doing enough? Because it seems like it's just there, just to comply with the auditing standards, but is there enough consequence management? Thank you.
Okay, I think Mr. Marquette asked like 4 questions. We'll open up the floor. We're just going to take some more questions, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you. Mine is going to be very short. My name is Mafenu from the Center for Lifelong Learning on the marketing side. I just want to find out the connection between the investigative arm as well as the prosecutorial arm of government, whether have this, I would call them criminals in this case, is it not the case that they actually broke, should I say, the effectiveness of those two arms of government in terms of infiltration, to a point where everything else started just falling apart into pieces? Because if you cannot have investigations being thorough, they'll always fail in court. And of course, even the prosecution itself, if it's got a weak case, they always would throw it out of the court. So my question is, how do we restore those two elements so that we can have the kind of justice that looks at cases without any fear or favor, in terms of really implementing the law and making it happen for every one of us? Thanks.
Program Director, can you recognize me?
You are recognized, Mr. Kikan. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much, and good morning once again, colleagues. Mine is it's a question on the culture as South Africans, that we've got a wrong culture in South Africa, wherein we are seen to be perpetuating corruption ourselves, because in a situation where there's a corruptor, there's a corruptee. The question should be, if a traffic officer is stopping me on a roadblock, why must I agree to pay a bribe? Perhaps it should start with us. But the question is, how do we begin to change that culture of not willing to pay a bribe. So it means as communities as well, we might be perpetuating corruption and crime. So it must start with us. So that is just a comment. The question is, again, my second question, or second comment, is around what Mr. Makwe alluded to, because I've got the same issue in terms of our constitution. Perhaps our constitution, colleagues, needs to be reviewed, because, you know, criminals have got rights, even more than the people that are suffering because of the same corruption. When a person has been arrested after committing crime, they speak of these rights, you know, all these rights that they have. But what about the victims? So perhaps maybe we need to relook at our constitution and begin to address those issues that speaks to our rights. And for our academics, I just want to check with you in terms of the impact of our constitution in perpetuating crime and corruption. What is the literature saying? What is that as academics you can input in terms of looking at how our constitution can protect individual rights, but at the same time, make sure that victims of crime and corruption are as well catered within the ambit of our constitution? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we'll pause right now, and then we'll give the presenters a chance to respond. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lots of questions. And as I was telling Dr. Machete just now, the fortunate thing about being an academic is we don't necessarily come with the answers. Our jobs are to ask, I think, the difficult questions. Having said that, I want to just try to collectively put some points across. Michael Jackson sang a song. I'm starting with The Man in the Mirror. And I think our last speaker posed that question, what's wrong with the culture? Littering is an offense. Drive around South Africa, how much litter do you see? Speeding is an offense. Going through a red robot is an offense. We get so angry with the taxis for doing it. How often do we make ourselves guilty of the same things? It goes about respect for the rule of law. If we had respect for the Constitution, we wouldn't be talking about victims' rights and the criminals' rights, because there would be respect for the human being. At the end of the day, we are sitting with human beings. So, NPA doing their job, our law enforcement doing their job, they are human beings. We are human beings. What culture have we allowed to permeate our psyche and how we operate? Cybercrime is a global phenomena, and I don't think South Africa are unique in being targeted. I'm not sure whether we yet have the capacity to address all the challenges. I'm not sure if the NPA have perhaps lost through what was going on, the destabilizing of our law enforcement agencies, through the placement of people into positions. And I was an investigator for many years, and when you work your butt off and you get to court and your docket gets sold or something goes wrong with the evidence because somebody else had a finger in the pie, you get disillusioned. And I think people leave. And not everybody wants to be that whistleblower. Not everybody wants to put their lives on the line. But we've got to start with the man in the mirror. Obey the rule of the law. When you go to Mozambique, don't speed. They will pull you off if you speed. and you will pay a bribe because you don't want to go through the repercussions. In South Africa, if you don't give the cops a reason to solicit a bribe, cause. At the end of the day, remember, he who alleges must prove. I also watched the gold mafia expose. And I'm not saying this about that specific one. It's very easy to make all sorts of allegations. Simply because I don't like a person or I want to undermine the person, there has to be evidence at the end of the day to prove the allegation. This is where our whistleblowers come forward and often pay the highest price. But at the end of the day, it's the people behind the position who have to be held accountable. And until we don't get consequence management, until we don't see some unnamed people being prosecuted for what we all, I think, know, I think we cannot really say that we are making progress.
Covering that questions, and I'm going to cover the question for Mr. Kikana, the culture and the review. Why must we agree to pay a bribe? Difficulty that we have in our country, corruption is a practical crime where you can involve in corruption while you want to protect yourself by making a crime or committing a crime. Then if we can check on that one, since we don't have a review for the policy of corruption, then we're still going to need the system that will support the constitution in terms of the corruption, especially when we can check the bribery is in very high percentage in South Africa. As Prof. Tenga asked, that the police commit crime. We can't say yes, we can't say no. But the main fact that we want to know that whether we are going to win about the crime that are involved in corruptions, then we can start here. Let's say corruption sometimes is not a crime like a street crime. It's crime that is on the system. Normally, we talk about the procurement fraud, money laundering. Then who's doing money laundering? Because if government produce the funds for assisting the community, then it's where we found that a lot of corruption happened. And again, to cover the media, people who report the corruption, they are in fear of exposing the higher position or the leadership of the country in terms of corruptions. Then we don't have a street border where you can find out that we know that if we can check at Sunnyside, Pretoria, we have a flat, but who's owning the flat now? It's not South Africans. Then we can check even the population in our country. We don't have a South African who owns spaza shop at the rural area, even in the urban. Then those spaza shop owned by the foreign entity, for example, you know that maybe the owner of the spaza shop, they don't have the document. Then who collecting the bribe there? Because actually they must be arrested if they don't have a proper document to stay on our country. But we still going to support and buy as community. Then we know that the person have no document and then is living with us. Then the corruption, we are ourselves who promoting the corruption. Actually, whether we are winning or we are losing, we need to come up with a mind to review our policy and to set up a system that will support by criminal justice to fight against the individual who committed corruption, so that system must be hard. In America, they arrest R. Kelly. We know that R. Kelly is then now it's arrested, life sentence. Then that system is very strong because no one will do the very same mistake that R. Kelly did. Then we don't have a freedom to commit corruption. If we have a strong system, we'll have a fear that we can't continue committing this because we know that our system will band against us. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm just going to touch on some of the questions. Does the NPA have the capacity? There's an ongoing debate in Parliament whereby they were discussing the NPA is lacking funds right now. I don't know how that happened. They're debating whether they should get donations from the public. And there's a debate that if some political parties are saying if the NPA gets donations from the public, it will not serve its purpose. It will be biased looking at those people who have donated. So in terms of capacity, I would say we do lack capacity in the NPA. If you check, our prosecutors are struggling very hard to deal with commercial crimes and fraud and corruption. Most cases do not end up in court because of lack of knowledge of how to deal with such cases. And the other issue, well, our ICT experts are doing very well. The hackers, they've hacked our departments almost every year. They had I don't know, TransUnion before, demanding lots of money. They got all our records from TransUnion and Credit Bureau. And they threatened them that if they don't get such billions or millions of money, they're going to release our records or even buy a house under your name. So recently, 2 weeks ago, they hacked into the Department of Justice to steal guardian funds in the Department of Justice. You can see how these guys are operating, and we need structures in place that will actually fight against those criminals, the the hackers per se. And the other issue, the investigator and the prosecutor need to work hand in hand. Now, some of the cases, you open a case today, then the prosecutor who's standing in will come and write, say it's a weekend, will come and check the docket and write outside that nolle prosecute, case dismissed, because of the investigator or the police has done a wrongful arrest. Most of our public funds ends up in lawsuits. Criminals are actually gaining from the police. SAP especially, they lose millions through lawsuits. You arrest someone illegally, unlawfully, and then tomorrow they sue the state. That's why we end up lacking public funds. Just this morning, in Tshwane, the new mayor was addressing the issue of lack of resources. I was surprised when the mayor said some of the police officers are using their own private vehicles to conduct their police work. And if you look at those Metro police officers, you look at their uniform, they lack even vehicles. Now, what about going there and asking for cold drink? When they use their own petrol, using their own vehicles, what do they get in return? When they go there and stop you, they ask for cold drink. So we need to have more debate around this, and our system of government needs to be more knowledgeable. We need to transfer skills. Education is needed in the NPA, in the police, regarding how to provide their services. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open the floor again just for 2 questions, and I'm going to move on very quickly to the questions we have online. Are there any more other questions? Okay, you recognized?
Thank you once more again. The tender system, is it really working for us South Africans, or is it only working for the elite group? Because through the tender system, we have seen so many corruption being perpetrated in the form of the tender system. So I think that is also one of the things that needs to be revisited. I don't know which other system will be best. As much as the government is trying to empower the previously disadvantaged through the tender system, but it seems like it's only benefiting a few elite. You can look, we can talk about the issue of Hammaskral, where millions were spent, but you look at the project till today. I mean, we've got about close to 30 people that died because of cholera, but the tender was issued. That's another problem. I mean, if you look at the Prevention and Combating of Crime Activity Act, number 12 of 2004, it says it obliges any person who holds position of authority or who ought to know reasonably that to have known or suspected that another person is committed corrupt activities of the offense of theft, fraud, extortion, forgery, and uttering, involving to an amount of 100,000. Our situation that the institution is facing. We've got the higher body who is aware of the activities that are taking place in our institution. Has there been any arrest to that? Coming to the education, I think it's high time we start teaching corruption from primary. Not only at in higher education institution. I think we should start teaching corruption from primary level. I thank you.
Oh, okay. No, she was moving with the mic.
Thank you very much, Program.
Thank
I think what we need to do is to find a way of orientating our officials when they take office. And this should apply to, for example, our councillors and mayors and any other politician holding office. They get into an office by virtue of being elected. They don't attend any interviews whatsoever. They are elected by us as citizenry. We entrust them with the responsibility to lead and to implement some of the government projects. But we don't empower them to lead us. So perhaps as an institution of higher learning, we need to find a way of how can we collaborate with various government structures from local, provincial to national to say, how do we induct, the new or the newly elected members into an office so that they can begin to understand the responsibility that they have in terms of making sure that they avoid, corrupt actions or corrupt activities. And sometimes people would say, on hindsight, I was not aware that I'm committing crime. Perhaps maybe it might be an excuse, but some of the colleagues that I've engaged with in public and private sectors, you find that they were not aware of certain legislative framework that governs them and the responsibilities that they need to carry. So perhaps maybe a little bit of education would assist the nation. So that is where, as an institution, we're coming in to say, how do we then collaborate with these government entities and private sector to ensure that the level of induction is really carried out, when new, officials are getting into an office. Let me add on to what Mr. Makwe said about also introducing, corruption as a course maybe at a lower level in terms of our curriculum. That we need to really include that as part of our curriculum, more especially when you look at the module on ethics. That ethics actually cuts across all the disciplines. There's science ethics that one needs to observe. There's ethics or ethical conduct that one needs to observe when it comes to procurement, ethics in accounting and the like. So if we can begin to infuse that as part of our curriculum, I believe that we can impact, on the nature of graduates that we produce, those that would then be coming to the universities and ultimately be joining, part of the workforce. That if we include the element of ethics in our curriculum, perhaps maybe we can cap some of the corrupt activities that we have observed over a number of time. I think we really need to do something at the lower level, which of course I agree with Mr. Makwe in his submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kagana. Would you like to respond to the comments that were made by the two?
Okay, thanks. In terms of tender, that if we can check on our government system, before 1994, we have a yellow van. When you see only a yellow van, whether you committed crime or not, you run. Because the police will arrest you, even if you don't know what you did. But now, you can check on the system of South Africa, the high-profile politicians and leaders who committed crime in the companies or businesses, no one is arrested. And then we're still talking about the tenders, and we're using the very same system from 1994 till today, 2023. But no one arrested, and only people who are benefiting are those who are in high positions. So I think we still need, in terms of law, the investigator can investigate whatever they investigate, whether the Hawks, ICU, a special investigation unit and SAPS, forensic investigator or any investigator, accountant or auditors, they can audit everything and submit it, the relevant information or the relevant evidence, so that the arrest or maybe the sentence must be made. In court, there is still going to be argument. The law enforcement of criminal justice and the Constitution of South Africa are binding, especially when we go to the court, whether we have the evidence. We can check last year for the case of we know that the president going to be already investigated, but going to court. Then before that, there was a strike. The malls, everything. Why we create that kind of crime? Well, we know that we want to fight corruption. So meaning the corruption will never die, will never end. Especially the tender is where the big amount of money and the money laundering, procurement fraud occur. So we have to check the system that will make audit, because you can't even audit the corruption in terms of tender, say money laundering and in. Because that case you'll get that, you'll find out the case is not going anywhere. But just a little case for, we can check the case of Thabo Bester now, where it is. Then it's the trial case of, who's the other one? PPE. Then you can check that they know that there will come something to replace some other cases. Then there's no case that going anywhere. Since today we didn't find any political leader or leader arrested for corruption, the high corruption of tenders. That means no one will get arrested. Didn't arrest anyone. So I just want to say this: we need audit. For Americans, most Western countries, they have different agencies. The case, when they investigate the case, for an example, there is FBI and the other agencies that are investigating the case, they know that the information will never link. Even if the document is lost, the other agencies will access the information and continue investigating with that evidence. So in our country, we still need the system that will align with other countries that are doing best. You can check our border gate. Before 1994, no one will come to South Africa illegally. But now, everyone have freedom, and we don't know what is the problem. How are we going to win the corruption? Well, we are afraid of that, because you can't investigate and do whistleblowers for an example. You know, you do whistleblower for someone who steal 12 billion. So you think you're going to survive. You're not going to survive. You want to take care of your family. You want to live. You can't live for saying, no, we can't fight corruption, but we can prevent corruption. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, we have, wow, the debate online is quite interesting. Thank you so much to everybody. They are debating, I'm telling you. This is why I keep on leaning in, because I'm like, oh wow, okay, then I forget that I'm here. But okay, we've got so many questions that have been posed on both platforms, on YouTube and on the Teams link. I have picked about 4 of them. I'm looking at the time. I'm not sure how much more time I can give, but then these questions, the first 3 questions I'm about to read out, are directed directly to Professor Benson. The first, the question was, you spoke about how low press freedom is. Can you elaborate on that, on the low press freedom? That's the first one. The second one was, where do we get it wrong if we have all the legislative framework and the Constitution? The third one, which I think also builds onto that, is there a will to tackle corruption? I will give it over to you, Prof. Benson. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so just one point of correction. I think the low press freedom featured in Charles's presentation.
Oh, okay.
But speaking about low press freedom, I think what happened to one of our investigative journalists, Corin Morn, is a prime example of how investigators are being targeted by people with lots of money. And if you are just a normal tax-paying citizen, you don't have a lot of spare change for lawyers' fees and advocates' costs. And then you basically end up alone in a situation where you get targeted for speaking the truth. And look back past 10 years, who's been exposing these things? Investigative journalists. Then I'm wondering, where's our intelligence agencies? But I think we answered that question. We have ample legislation. Isn't that perhaps the problem? Isn't it perhaps too many cooks in the kitchen? Too many hoops to jump through. My colleague just now said, isn't it time for a type of induction course for finance managers who take up positions in local government, provincial government? There are so many things that you need to know about. Isn't it time that we see, rather than more, where the maxim reads less is more? Is there a will? Sure. I think the answer will come with the 2024 elections, when the people speak. There was recently an artist on YouTube. What an amazing song. Very satirical. Praise, you work for us. And I think it's time South Africans, normal South Africans like you and I, remind the people in authority who got them there and who is actually paying their salary. When I was a cop and I would attend a complaint and the complainant wasn't happy with how I handled the situation, he'd take 20 cents, he would say, remember, I pay your salary. And then I would take 20 cents out of my wallet and say, here's your contribution. At the end of the day, guys, we, the taxpayers, are the ones that are paying their salary. I think I've covered the questions that I was able to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. We have some more questions, especially I've noticed we've got about 10 talking about whistleblowers. And they're saying, what can we do? Protection of whistleblowers leaves much to be desired. What can be done? Which is a very big one, I think. And the second one is POCA, POCA, the best form of legislation to curb gang violence. It is very similar to common law, but is it effective against organized crime? Surely there are unique challenges associated with organized crime. Should sentences be increased? Is that the solution? Noting that we've got overcrowded correctional services centers. The third one I'm going to give now on this session is, how do we get public trust when we took the same police staying in the same area to go and arrest their neighbor, friends, or family? Can they do that without informing them first about their arrest? Why can't we deploy a police force that is from another province to work in another town, not their hometown, because they are too comfortable, including those at the borders and home affairs staff? I'll leave it there for now, and I will put it back to the panel. Thank you.
Yeah, thought-provoking questions. And Beatrice and I were chatting offline now quickly. I think what's wonderful about today is that people are starting to ask questions. And it's going beyond the scope of just the short learning program and the webinar for today. There are lots of studies that have shown the advantages and disadvantages of having police out to the community, working in the community, cross-pollination. So there's advantages and disadvantages. I think what we are sitting with is we are sitting with a law enforcement entity which have some elements that shouldn't be there for whatever reason. But I also want to emphasize that I think the majority of our law enforcement officials out there are good, honest people who wake up in the morning, who put on the badge, who kiss their spouse. They don't know if they're going home tonight, who sometimes also pay the ultimate price. But then you spoke about respect. Respect is earned. Trust is earned. Ethics, ethical conduct, is not what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when people aren't watching. How does that tender committee look like? Who gets put on the tender committee? My colleague behind me raised the issue of where our beautiful institution is, in the midst of a horrible, horrible mess, where we are washing our laundry in public. How did we get here, guys? Are we the frog in the water, in the pot, where the pot was put on and the water boiled slowly, and now we realize, oh my hat, what happened? I think as a society we need to do introspection, because the change starts here.
Okay, thanks again. In terms of whistleblowers, we're still going to have a problem in terms, because whistleblowers need protection. First, if you see that you, at the community that you are, is a councillor, for an example, committing a crime or tender, there is a tender that maybe need to be implemented on your community, then you want to act against that. That means you have to have a certain protection. So who going to give you protection? Remember, as a community, we the councillor is committing crime or corruption, councillor must go. Then we agree on that one. But when comes the night, where are you going to sleep? Because you were exposing the councillor that are maybe to commit a corruption that are maybe hidden. And again, we need to teach corruption at the primary stage. I agree with the Mr. Makwela to say corruption have to start at the primary stage. Is where we're going to teach more about bribery. You know, when you go, remember our SAPS before 1994, they know that they are informant. You will not know whether they take a policeman from KZN to work to Limpopo to KZN, then there is no relationship between law enforcement and community member. Because sometimes when you work at your community, some of the community are your families, your friends. You can't make arrest. You will better see a better way to deal with the problem. Which is, that way is the corruption. You need to pay bribe so that you will protect that person and the case will get lost. So I think for whistleblowers, we still need to come up with a solid implementation. As Prof. Benedine alluded that we are not expert and no expert in corruption. I usually told my student, I have 170 students who attended class every week. So we work together to develop the better way how we can teach the students regarding the corruption, because there is no expert in corruptions. So I think some of the questions are difficult to get a proper answer or correct quality answer today, but are relevant, and we're still going to do a research and see with the other students that are registering the anti-corruption commercial crime. Then me and Prof. Tenga, we're still going to work with those students and see if maybe they can give us a better way or better practice of dealing with corruptions. So thanks.
Hey. Thank you so much. Due to time constraints, and it's becoming such an interesting discussion, as I was actually thinking now when all the comments that were made by Mr. Gagana, Mr. Makwe, and everybody else on the panel, the fact that this starts at grassroots level. We've got this, this subject, life orientation, that the kids do. And to be honest, I do not think that it is covering what we really need to have. The curriculum needs to change on that one, because ethics, as you said, it covers all disciplines. And we need to start at grassroots, at home, little things with your children. But thank you so much for just being involved, and all the comments that we've online, all the comments on the YouTube channel, on Teams. We are definitely going to respond to each and every one of them later on, just that we've got time constraints, but thank you so much. Prof, would you like, just hold on please. Oh yes, we're going to add your presentations as well to the online platforms, YouTube, the YouTube channel. I've always wanted to say that. We're going to do that. But thank you very much. I just want to hand over to Mr. Gagana to just do the closing for us. Thank you.
Program Director, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that corruption in South Africa has had long-lasting and far-reaching effects. It has deterred investment, created huge economic losses, exacerbated poverty, inequality, endangered public sector dysfunctionality, service delivery protests, unrest, and resulted in human rights violations. Let me thank Mr. Marakalala for initiating this activity and also setting the scene today. Thank you very much, sir. Prof. Benson, thank you very much for providing, the literature, you know, on crime and corruption, and giving us, you know, a comparative analysis as to how we're doing with our fellow African countries. And you really painted the picture that we should all take, you know, note of. I like to quote you when you said, don't put the law without putting resources to support that law. I'm paraphrasing what you said, but I hope I've captured that well. So meaning that as much as Ndate Makwe, our constitution is praised as the best, but we don't have mechanisms to support the constitution itself. Let me also thank Dr. Machete for really giving us a perspective and supporting what Prof. Benson presented. Prof. Tenga, I'll be wrong not to recognize the inputs that you've made and to also support us in this initiative, and by also providing perspective in terms of responding to the issues that were presented by our panelists. The UCL marketing team, under the leadership of Ndate Pora, thank you very much for running this journey. I know this is one of the many that we're going to run up to the end of the year. So thank you very much for that. And also the team, the marketing team. The UCL colleagues present, thank you very much for coming. And those that are attending online, thank you very much for coming. The colleagues from our media and digital services for delivering and carrying out this webinar, you know, to the public out there. You know, we would not be able to reach the numbers that we've reached in this webinar if it was not because of your contribution. Ladies and gentlemen that have joined us also in various social media public platforms, thank you very much for participating in this webinar. As I've promised, this is one of the many that are going to come. And the conversation is going to continue, as our program director have said, that we're going to report and actually respond to those matters that we have raised on the public platform. Ladies and gentlemen, let me officially close this session and thank you for attending. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody in attendance. I really enjoyed having the conversations with you. To the panel, you're most welcome to just step out and grab something to eat. We just need to have a short meeting with the UCL staff. It'll come. Yes, and then if you could just hang around because we would like to have some pictures with you.